The table was already tight before anyone spoke. The kind of tension you can't script. The kind that creeps in when two people sit down with too much history and no one willing to flinch first. Karoline Leavitt had been invited to speak as a rising GOP voice. Jasmine Crockett was already at the table. It was supposed to be a spirited conversation about women's rights. But everyone knew what it really was. A televised collision. Joy Behar opened with a smile too wide to feel real. We're so lucky to have both of you here today. Let's talk about the future of reproductive freedom. Karoline cut in. You mean the future of unborn children, Joy? Let's start by using language that's honest. The audience murmured. Jasmine Crockett didn't even blink. She turned toward Karoline and said, calmly, honest language? You want honest? Let's talk about what happens when a 13-year-old rape victim in your state can't legally ask for help without being punished. Karoline smiled, the kind that wasn't warm, just practiced. We believe life begins at conception. That's not punishment. That's protection. Jasmine leaned in. Her voice didn't rise. It dropped. No, that's not protection. That's cruelty dressed up as law. And you know it. The room went still. No one laughed. No one smiled. And just like that, the segment wasn't about debate anymore. It was about consequence. Karoline Leavitt didn't flinch. She folded her hands neatly, her voice as polished as every interview she'd done before. You want to talk about cruelty? Let's talk about what's cruel to the most vulnerable. Abortion has become a political tool, not a moral choice. And you, Congresswoman, are part of that machinery. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. Her response came slow and sharp. You don't get to lecture me about morality while defending policies that force women into silence, poverty, and fear. The crowd stirred. A few people clapped. Not wildly. Just enough to break the illusion of neutrality. Joy Behar tried to jump in. Let's make sure we're keeping this civil. Jasmine didn't take her eyes off Karoline. Civil is what you ask for when the truth makes you uncomfortable. Karoline leaned in, still smiling. The truth is, women can choose to be mothers without killing their children. I've seen it. I've lived it. What you call rights, I call excuses. Jasmine's voice dropped again. And what you call values, I call policy violence. There it was. No yelling. No chaos. Just a line so sharp it cut through the entire set. Whoopi looked at the floor. Sonny Hostin blinked twice. Even the band in the corner sat still. Because everyone watching knew, this wasn't a debate anymore. This was a reckoning. Karoline Leavitt's hands were still folded, but her smile started to slip. Just slightly. Enough to show the edges. You're emotional, she said. I get that. But laws aren't made from emotion. They're made from principle. Jasmine Crockett sat forward. Not aggressively. Just close enough to make sure every word landed without echo. And whose principle decides when a woman becomes a criminal for surviving? Yours? A party platform written by people who will never carry a child? That's not law. That's control. A slow murmur rolled through the audience. Phones started lifting from laps. Viewers knew. This wasn't daytime banter anymore. Karoline's voice sharpened. You can frame this however you want, but at the end of the day, we're talking about protecting the voiceless. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. Then stop silencing the ones who already have voices. You talk about the voiceless, and I agree. But that includes the woman bleeding in a parking lot because a pharmacist turned her away. That includes the teenager scared to speak her trauma because your laws turn her body into evidence. Karoline's eyes narrowed. You're trying to make this emotional so you can win the argument. Jasmine answered without blinking. I'm not trying to win anything. I'm trying to stop a system that treats dignity like a partisan privilege. The silence returned, not empty, but full. Full of the weight of every woman watching from home, waiting for someone to say what they were never allowed to. And Jasmine Crockett had just said it. Karoline Leavitt sat straighter now, her smile finally gone. She laced her fingers together like someone preparing to deliver a closing argument. But Jasmine Crockett had already taken the floor, not with volume, with clarity. You claim you're defending life, Jasmine said. But where are you when that life grows up without health care? Without shelter? Without protection from the same system you call moral? Karoline fired back. You're changing the subject. We're here to talk about Roe. About abortion. About life. No, Jasmine said. You're here to pretend that this conversation exists in a vacuum. I'm here to tell the truth. If you legislate birth but abandon life afterward, that's not pro-life. That's pro-control. The audience murmured again, louder now. A few scattered claps broke through. Joy Behar glanced at the producers offstage, unsure whether to jump in or stay quiet. Karoline's voice rose for the first time. I believe in personal responsibility. That includes consequences. Jasmine leaned in just slightly, her tone never changing. So when a 10-year-old is raped and forced to carry, whose responsibility is that? Hers. Karoline froze. The air shifted. Jasmine didn't flinch. That's the consequence of your policy. Not theory. Not debate. Reality. For a moment, no one at the table moved. Even Whoopi stayed quiet. And somewhere off camera, the control room stopped counting seconds. Because Jasmine Crockett had just buried the spin beneath something unshakable. Fact. Karoline Leavitt opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. Just the flicker of calculation behind her eyes. She glanced toward the audience, toward the producers, then back at Jasmine Crockett, who hadn't moved at all. I don't make exceptions for feelings, Karoline finally said. We are either consistent or we are lost. Jasmine responded instantly. And I don't make exceptions for cruelty. That landed. No applause. Just a slow exhale from the crowd, like they'd all been holding something in and didn't know it until that moment. Karoline tried to recover. What you call cruelty, I call courage. It takes courage to stand up for life even when it's unpopular. Jasmine's voice stayed low. No, it takes distance. It takes being far enough away from pain to pretend your policy is noble. You sit in air-conditioned studios, write legislation with clean hands, and call it bravery while someone else bleeds for it. Whoopi shifted in her seat. Sunny Hostin's eyes didn't leave Jasmine. Joy Behar stayed silent, watching the conversation slip fully out of their control. Karoline's hands tightened on the table. If you're trying to shame me, I'm not, Jasmine said, cutting her off. I'm trying to remind you that shame is what happens when conscience wakes up too late. That silence returned, and it was louder than any sound they could have scripted. Karoline Leavitt leaned back, her jaw tight. You're emotional. That's fine, but you're using feelings to erase facts. Jasmine Crockett turned toward her fully. No, I'm using facts to explain why your version of morality hurts real people. Karoline's voice sharpened. We've reduced abortions in this country. That's progress. Jasmine shook her head. You haven't reduced need. You've reduced access. You've increased fear. You've made it harder for women to survive something they never asked for. Karoline didn't respond. Jasmine continued. Reducing abortion without addressing healthcare, poverty, education, and violence isn't policy. It's punishment. The audience sat still. And for the first time, Karoline Leavitt looked unsure. Jasmine's voice dropped even further. And here's what you won't say on this show, but I will. You don't trust women. You trust rules. You trust systems built by people who will never live with the consequences. Karoline opened her mouth, but Jasmine didn't let her in. You say you protect the voiceless, but you drown out the voices right in front of you. She pointed to the crowd. To the woman in the third row who couldn't get her prescription filled because her pharmacist said she didn't look sick enough. To the mother in the sixth row who lost her daughter to sepsis because the hospital was scared to operate. To every woman who sat quietly in this country while lawmakers like you called their grief a necessary price. Karoline didn't speak, because Jasmine had taken the air out of the room with something no one could argue with. Truth. Karoline Leavitt finally spoke, but the rhythm was off now. The polish had worn thin. You want to turn this into a spectacle. You think louder words make stronger arguments. But this isn't activism. It's theater. Jasmine Crockett didn't rise to it. She didn't need to. This isn't theater, she said. It's testimony. She turned to the audience again, not for applause, but for eye contact. Because every time someone like you sits at this table and calls it a debate, someone out there thinks they're supposed to stay quiet about what happened to them. Someone out there believes their pain is a political inconvenience instead of a lived reality. Joy Behar leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. Congresswoman, final word? Jasmine didn't look at Joy. She looked straight at Karoline. You don't have to believe in abortion. But you do have to believe in women. And if you can't start there, then you don't belong at a table that claims to represent us. Karoline stared back, but she didn't speak. And Jasmine Crockett stood. Not to walk off, not to storm out, but to show that strength wasn't volume. It was presence. The camera didn't cut. No one called for music. And for the first time in a long time on that stage, nothing needed to be said, because everyone had just heard enough.